All right. It is my, I don't know what the right words are here, but you should know that Quang spent 2 years with me in Chicago, and he's the greatest student that I've ever had, and also the worst student that I've ever had. You know people like that, right? Okay. Maybe not. Maybe it's just me. Quang Nguyen is a fourth-year PhD candidate in the Department of Statistics and Data Science at Carnegie Mellon University. During his PhD, Quang has worked on statistical modeling problems in complex settings such as tracking data in sports and social networks. He's a two-time NFL Big Data Bowl finalist and a die-hard supporter of Manchester United. Let's welcome our speaker, Quang.
This is good. All right. Thank you, Greg, for the introduction. So, yeah, let's talk about NFL COD. So, change of direction, or COD, is an important component of player movement in American football. So, what does COD actually mean? All right. So, here's the definition taken from Wikipedia, saying that change of direction is any activity that involves a rapid whole body movement with a pre-planned change of velocity or direction. So, in the context of NFL player movement, we can think of COD simply as the ability of a player to rapidly and efficiently alter the trajectory. So, how do we actually evaluate change of direction? So, traditionally, at the NFL Scouting Combine before the draft, there are two time drills, the three-cone and the 20-yard shuttle, which are designed to evaluate sort of agility and lateral quickness of players by requiring them to run as fast as possible in different sort of non-linear patterns, all right? But what about actual in-game performance? All right, so these drills have limitations, as they don't capture, how players sort of respond in live, real-time scenarios. Right? These are being measured at the combine in settings where player movement is not constrained by things like contact or different moving pieces on the field. So there remains a lack of objective approaches for evaluating in-game COD performance in American football. So how do we fill this gap? And player tracking data. So obviously, thanks to the NFL Big Data Bowl, we have access to next-gen stats tracking data collected via chips embedded in player shoulder pads and also the football. And this gives us data at 10 frames per second, providing on-field location and trajectory information for all 22 players at every moment within the play. All right, so this table is just showing, the typical structure of football tracking data that, many of us here are familiar with, where we have different attributes like, the timestamp, the X, Y, 2D coordinates of a player, along with speed, acceleration, orientation and direction, along with the event annotations associated with specific frames within this play. All right. So we want to use the tracking data to first define a measure for change of direction. And in particular, we're going to compute this quantity called the turn angle. All right. So showing here in this diagram, we have the X and Y locations for a player at three successive time points, all right? T-1, T, and T+1. And the turn angle, that angle in blue right there, is simply the angle the player takes between successive steps, formed by those successive displacement vectors, all right? And the inspiration of this turn angle measure is actually coming from the animal movement literature, which consists of decades of work where they would track and model the movement of like a seal or a fox or a beaver or whatever using GPS telemetry data. So might as well, pour it over to the world of sports analytics and apply it to player movement in football. So now in this work, our main quantity of interest is the variability in turn angle. So the keyword here is variability, all right? So why should we care about this, all right? So let's think about what it means to have high versus low variability in change of direction. So in the case of low variability, This may correspond to sort of straight line, linear movement, and also more consistent and predictable turning behavior. So just think of a player who just runs straight most of the times for low variability. Versus when we have high variability, this may be associated with sort of shifty movement and the ability to make sort of variable and erratic turns. All right, and this may reveal an athletic trait that can be useful, from a player performance evaluation standpoint. So that's the whole motivation for looking at, again, the variability in change of direction. So here in our work, we're just focusing on change of direction for ball carriers on run and pass plays. All right, and in particular for run plays, we consider only frames after the handoff for running backs only. All right, and for pass plays, we look at tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs after the catch. Again, only when they're the ball carrier running with the football. All right. And we're going to rely on the data from the NFL Big Data Bowl 2025 for our analysis, which consists of player tracking data for the first 9 weeks of the 2022 NFL regular season. All right, let's talk about the model. So to begin, we're going to let phi sub ijt denote the turn angle for ball carrier J at frame T of play I. All right, this histogram down here is just showing the observed turn angle distribution for NFL ball carriers in our sample. All right, so in this model, we use a von Mises distribution for the response, and this is a suitable choice since we're dealing with an angular or directional outcome. All right, so the frame level turn angle follows a von Mises with two parameters: the mean mu and the concentration kappa. And kappa here is a reciprocal of dispersion, where a large kappa value corresponds to a more concentrated or less dispersed distribution. All right, so we're going to explicitly model both the mean and the concentration parameters to understand not only which direction players tend to move in, but also the variability in their turning behavior, which is what we're mainly interested in. All right, so first, to model the mean turn angle mu, we condition on different covariates x, jt as fixed of x, including the turn angle from the previous time point. And this effectively captures the notion of directional persistence, as players might make successive turns in a similar manner. All right. We also have different tracking data features describing the ball carrier and their relationship with other players on the field. All right, and to elaborate more on our features, here's a snapshot of a given frame in a play where the black circles represent the offense, the white circles are the defense. So here we construct different features describing the location and trajectory of the ball carrier in orange, with the ball right there, the closest defender to the ball carrier at this frame in blue, along with simple counts of other players on the field in each direction with respect to the ball carrier. And obviously, this is really just a simple starting point, and it is certainly possible to consider more extensive and refined features. But our choice here is mainly for ease of model fitting, as these features are treated as sort of linear fixed effects in our model for the mean parameter. On to the model for the concentration parameter kappa. All right, so here we first account for different covariates that may have an impact on the turn angle variability. All right, so these are the frame level info about the ball carrier trajectory, such as the speed, the acceleration, and the cumulative distance covered, as well as the play type, so run or pass, and also the position of the ball carrier, so whether the ball carrier is a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end. Most importantly, and also most interestingly, we include ball carrier random effects when modeling the turn angle concentration kappa. All right, so here we have a random intercept term, U sub j, for ball carrier j, with variance depending on the position group of the ball carrier. So again, wide receiver, tight end, or running back. And this sort of enables us to estimate how much better or worse a player is relative to the average ball carrier in the same position in terms of the turn angle variability. All right. Here also note that each position groups has its own standard deviation. So we have one sigma for running back, one for tight end, and one for wide receiver. And each of these sigmas effectively measures the variation in turn angle concentration among players within a given position. All right. So that's the full model that we have. And so to implement this model, we fit it in the Bayesian framework by specifying weakly informed prior distributions for all model parameters. And the great benefit of a Bayesian approach here is that it naturally provides uncertainty quantification to all model parameters with their posterior distributions. And now, time for some results. Okay, so first we look at the ball carrier random effect standard deviation for each position. All right, so recall that in our model, we allow the random effect standard deviation to differ by position when modeling the turn angle concentration. All right, and again, this tells us how much ball carriers within a given position vary in their turn angle concentration. All right, so looking at our estimates from these posterior distributions, we see that there's more within position variation among tight ends and wide receivers compared to running backs. And this sort of makes sense if you think about the types of movement of players in these position groups. All right, so for tight ends and wide receivers, their movement, again, after the catch, typically occurs in the open field with high variability, all right, where they often have to improvise a lot, all right? But meanwhile, for running backs, their movements are generally more structured since they typically start carrying the ball in the backfield with this pass or run. All right, and this is often constrained by things like blocking schemes or run gaps, etc., leading to more sort of similar levels of turning variability among the running backs. All right, so next up we have some rankings. So the first one here is for running backs, where I am showing the posterior distributions of the ball carrier turn angle concentration random effect. All right. So here the players are sorted by the posterior mean estimates, where a higher posterior mean corresponds to higher concentration or lower variability in turn angle. All right. So the players up there at the top have lower variability in change of direction, which again corresponds to sort of more straight line movement. And those down here at the bottom have high variability. In other words, more shifty and erratic turning behavior. So we see that there are names here that make sense. So, for example, Justice Hill of the Baltimore Ravens, stands out with the most variability in turn angle. And this is the Lansbury eye test. Hill is known as like a shifty and agile runner. Now, on the other hand, players up there like Leonard Fournette and Jonathan Taylor display low variability in change of direction. All right. Indeed, these running backs are known to have a tendency to run straight ahead with speed and power more so than making sort of variable directional adjustments. All right, let's now look at some tight ends. So again, same figure as before. Top means low variability. Bottom means high variability in turn angle. And we see names down here like, George Kittle and Kyle Pitts and even like Travis Kelce all rank high in terms of high variability in turn angle, which consistent with, I guess, conventional rankings of, tight ends in the position and giving more, I guess, credibility to our approach. All right, so on to the most fun one, wide receivers. All right. Once again, low variability players at the top and high variability at the bottom. Let's first pay attention to the players down here. And we see that George Pickens is the shiftiest wide receivers in our sample of plays. All right. So, curious, George. We're curious to see whether the results for George Pickens match the film. So here's an example play of George Pickens as sort of the receiver, all right? Where he did a little change of direction right there, that little juke in real life to make a defender miss, all right? And that is his playing style. You know, there are lots of chaos in how he's moving after the catch. There you go. I'll let you watch it again one more time. Here's also a quote from the scouting report for George Pickens before the 2022 NFL draft. And it said, Pickens also flashes quick twitch athleticism with the ball in his hands and is able to make the first defender miss with his agility. So both the film and scouts agree with our results here, which is great for us. So now going back to this leaderboard, let's focus on the wide receivers up there. You know, so these are those that exhibit, again, lower variability in change of direction, aka more straight line movement. And the one that stands out is DK Metcalf. All right, so here's an animation of DK Metcalf running after the catch. Again, so once he catches the football, he just turns on his jet and, you know, takes off like a Terminator here. All right, full steam ahead. You know, relentless speed. All right. And in addition to this clip, we also have different measurements for DK Metcalf at the NFL Scouting Combine back in the days. All right? And we see that Metcalf is a freak athlete who ranks high in all areas across the board, like, you know, the 4-yard dash, the vertical jump, etc. Except the two agility drills that I mentioned earlier, again, the 3-cone and the 20-yard shuttle. Where he ranks in the very bottom percentile. All right, so one big takeaway from these results here is that there are different player movement profiles that we're observing, you know, where some players are more effective at running straight ahead with speed, like DK Metcalf, while others excel at making sort of erratic and variable turns, like George Pickens. What's also fun about these results is that earlier this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, my local team, not my favorite team, just my local team, acquired DK Metcalf in a trade with the Seahawks back in March. Fast forward to May, the Steelers traded George Pickens, who had previously been with the team, to the Cowboys. And 2 days after the Pickens trade, Steelers.com put out an article with a headline saying that the trade of Pickens, quote unquote, made sense for everyone. All right? Did it though? Who knows? But it's too bad we don't get to see two receivers with two different types of movement play together on the same team. So sorry, Ron Yoko. So now to recap, we've introduced a Bayesian modeling framework for evaluating change of direction performance of NFL players using tracking data. And this framework allows us to identify different player movement profiles where, you know, some players appear to lean on running straight ahead with speed, as we saw with Metcalf, while others excel at making variable turns, like Pickens. In terms of next steps, it is certainly possible to extend this work to look at change of direction in other aspects in the NFL, and anything you can think of from offense, defense, and even special teams. In fact, I recently added quarterbacks to this model, all right? In particular, QB runs and scrambles only. And here's a sneak peek of our results, all right? But first, does anyone here want to guess which QB is the leader of COD or COD? Any guesses? Feel just shout out some names. Who said to? So I heard some names. All right, I'm gonna tell the answer now. All right. So again, the leader means the shiftiest. Yeah. All right. I think it's more. Okay. So the title of this talk is NFL COD. It's very fitting that the NFL QB, COD or COD leader is Kyler Murray. Which makes perfect sense if you think about what Kyler typically does both on and off the field. So hashtag if you know, you know. All right. So The last thing I want to mention here regarding future work is biomechanics data or post data. So ultimately, we want to move beyond just capturing what a player does with a model, like variable tuning, to also understanding how they do so, with attributes like the hip orientation or the foot placement of a player and so on. All right, but that is for the future, if and when Mike Lopez decides to give us more data. All right. So to wrap up, I'd like to acknowledge Ron Yurko, who is my co-author in this work, also a Steelers fan. Please check out our paper and code, which are obviously publicly available online. Last but not least, our Carnegie Mellon Sports Analytics Conference coming up on October 24th to 25th of this year. So please visit the website for more details, and hope to see you in Pittsburgh in a few weeks. And with that, cheers.
So my question is essentially, when you showed the rankings of running backs, it seemed like a lot of the high change of direction players were pass catching backs, whereas some of the low change of direction players, they run a lot more than they catch passes. So how much do you think that kind of contributes to these discrepancies? And then kind of secondary to that is, have you thought at all about controlling for the context in which players get the ball? So run versus pass, or short pass versus downfield pass?
Yeah, so we did control for the type of play. So just to mention it one more time, for running back specifically, we consider running backs both after the catch and as the ball carrier on running plays. But we did control for the play type when modeling this triangle concentration. So that is in the model. But I see where you're coming from. But yeah, Mark.
Hey, Quang, really nice talk. I'm wondering if you have enough detail in your data to account for spin moves so that the angle actually could be outside minus pi to positive pi radians.
Yeah, so I've not thought about this yet. We could leverage, because we know the orientation, so which direction the shoulder pass is facing.
Maybe spin moves are too quick to...
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. So, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, that was a great talk. At the beginning, you talked about the traditional ways people looked at change of direction, like the shuttle run and the three-cone drill. Did you compare your results to see if there was correlation between your findings and those more traditional metrics?
So I did look into that. I did look into the correlation between my posterior mean estimate of, the dot right there, comparing it with first the 20-yard or the 4-yard dash, and also an agility score with it's the time combines between the three-cone and the shuttle. I think the correlation is pretty low, actually. I don't quite remember the one with the agility test, but if I remember correctly, for my metric versus the dash, we're having sort of three different quadrants, where one is DK Metcalf, fast but not shifty. The other is Pickens, it's kind of fast but kind of shifty. The one at the upper right is for tight ends who are slow and not shifty. So that's what we're observing when I try to compare this. I don't have any slides, but feel free to read the paper or digest more, I guess. Yeah, Sean.
Thanks, Quang. I suspect this might not have been possible with the data you received, but have you thought about looking at team changers or coaching changers to see if it's consistent, the measurements for a player across context shifts or style shifts like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So we definitely could look into that. I've never thought about it, but thanks for the suggestions, I guess.
Great talk. My question is kind of similar. Can you go to the receiver slide for a second? There you go. I'm thinking the type of route that a receiver runs might be very have a big dependence on how they move after the catch, and even a receiver, for example, when AJ Brown was on the Titans, that offense consisted of a lot of 15-yard in-breakers to AJ Brown. Then he gets traded to the Eagles, and he becomes one of the best downfield receivers in the league. Lots of go balls. Yeah. How do you think your metric does it adjust for that? How do you think it would perform? I know this is just 9 weeks of one season.
Yeah. So if I were to look at receivers pre-catch, not post-catch, I would definitely condition on the type of routes they're running. It would be curious to do that for a big durable this year. How about that?
Hi. I'm curious because on the wide receivers and the other positions, it seems like there's some pretty good players who have low change of direction. So do you think that having a low change of direction could also be an athletic skill? Or do you think that having a low change of direction is simply a lack of not being able to change direction that well?
Yeah, so that's interesting because if you think about Metcalf, right? I'm not saying he's bad here, right? He's just too fast, all right? So that could be an indication of, a reasonable athletic trait, but should definitely look into that more and think about it more. But that's a good point. But yeah.
Hi, great talk. I'm just curious if you've investigated any correlation between this variability and how many missed tackles the receiver ball carrier was created or kind of responsible for due to their change in direction ability.
Yeah, no, I've not looked into that, but I've thought about that, and we do have info from the Big Data Bowl regarding sort of missed tackles, and so we can compare it to the rate of missed tackle force or some other tackling measure. But that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Okay, so the way that I understand the change of direction metric is that it's averaged after the catch. In theory, if you juke someone on the 10-yard line and that's a high change of direction, and then you run the ball 90 yards down the field straight, would the average for that whole play be low, even though you clearly change direction quickly initially?
Oh yeah, that's something to think about. Yeah, I should look into that, I would say, but that's a really good question.
Good question. Anyone else?
Hi. So you mentioned that the Steelers had a chance where they could play the most shifty versus the least shifty player. I was just trying to understand, is there a benefit to having this kind of combination, or everybody would want to have more shifty players in their core?
Okay, so I think that if you want to have a good receiver, this is just a piece of the puzzle, I would say. There are other traits that you would need to take into account. So not just COD or speed or acceleration, but also so let's say for wide receiver, you probably need run blocking and route running and I don't know what's the word for that, effort and all of that. So I do think this is critical, but you should consider other traits to get a better understanding of who you're drafting or who you're trading for, etc. But yeah.
Hey, nice talk. If you ever get the chance to look across many seasons, something that might be of interest is to look at guys who've had a ACL or other kind of injury and just see, what effect your metric is able to pick up.
Yeah, that's definitely what we could do. You're looking at the impact of injury. But yeah, thanks.
All right, let's thank our speaker.